All right, so this is the universe. This will all be the domain of AI. Okay, cool. Yeah, so my talk is choosing the right AI stack for my product, and hopefully that the kind of journey that I've gone through is interesting to people, and maybe there's some learnings for decisions that you're trying to make. I will tell you that I had almost no like training or background in software development going into kind of vibe coding. So I've had a technical background, but not a software background. So it's been kind of a really interesting experience diving into AI and just software in general. And that's been forced by just a lot of tough decisions. So I just want to give kind of my story, and then maybe that's interesting to people. So I've done quite a few startups in the past, and a lot of startups built stuff that shouldn't exist. And I built lots of cool things. It's a jet bike, wearables, just grabbing cool tech and then trying to say, how do I take this cool tech and get people to buy it? Like, how does it serve their needs? And over time, after many very painful product failures, I learned that you got to flip this little arrow around and let the user needs drive the product decisions. And that's basically this whole talk, right? So we're done. We can go back now. But yeah, that's like the learning that I keep relearning it, actually. So like a year and a half of feed filter has not been linear whatsoever. It's been very kind of windy. I had to rebuild a lot of stuff. So like what started as an extension then became an app. And what I'm going to talk about now is a little bit of the back end, the server side. And now I have a website that is talking to the server. And that's kind of the main product, which I'll show you later, Wes, if you want to see. So in doing this, you still have to pick something, right? You can't just talk to people randomly. You have to kind of have some sort of founder market fit, is what I like to call it. And so I've decided to work on social media, which is a problem that I think most people have to varying degrees. It's super addictive. It's filled with brain rot. It fractures relationships. Personally, I had a lot of trouble with my sister, who doesn't really want to talk to me anymore due to mostly politics for the most part. But it's like, it's social media politics. Is it even real politics? If you read on Twitter. For me, like killing goals was like the main thing, because I was like, all right, this is interfering. I keep deleting these apps and I keep coming back. So maybe I can do something about this. Now, in the past, when I was doing startups, at this stage, I would brainstorm. So I'd say, here's many ideas to try to solve this kind of overarching problem. Over time, my process has kind of gone a little bit more involved. So what I do is I'd say, okay, what is the problem? Can I break that problem into its kind of component pieces? And then can I basically reverse engineer which of those pieces struggles the most, and can I reverse engineer how to solve those pieces? So at a super high level, someone on social media, they're just trying to get information about some subject or stay informed about their interest. And so first they have to define what their interests are. They have to locate it, that's your feed. And then whatever you kind of pause as you're scrolling, that's what you're actually learning, right? So from the name feed filter, you kind of get a sense like I'm focusing on the feed part of this problem. But even there, it's not quite enough detail to get into kind of coming up with actual product ideas. So again, I break out what does it mean to filter a feed? Well, first, this is more from the technical perspective. First, we have to extract the data from the feed. It's going to lead into web scraping. Then we need to interpret what the heck that stuff actually means. And then we need to categorize it in a way that it's useful to the user. So it's technical, but it's all kind of building up to this thing to make it easier for people to get information so that they don't end up addicted on brain rot and with no friends or family. So I'm going to focus on the interpret step of this. That's basically the whole startup, is just trying to really drill down on this one problem. So I didn't start out wanting to do anything with AI whatsoever, although I did start out because I'm a biased Bitcoiner. I said, well, clearly having a unbiased third party is out. I'm not going to pursue any solutions that involve a committee or like even the kind of ground news style things where you have both sides weighing in. It's like, who says those are the right sides? What if the 1% opinion is the correct one. So like Bitcoiners, objectively correct. There's no debate there, but it's 1% of the population. So that's a perfect example. Like the truth, AI always gives you the average, but it never gives you the actual like unpopular truth. So that's out the window. Now, I was hoping this would be easier. I was like, look, if you look on your feed and you see breaking news, you're like, okay, well, breaking news is probably not breaking. It's probably not news, so like maybe you can throw those out. But as I went into keyword search, I very quickly realized that this is like not going to solve the problem at all. It's way more nuanced and contextual. For example, on Instagram, you get a lot of sponsored and suggested posts, and they may be totally legitimate posts in someone else's feed, but in your feed, it's not going to work. So unfortunately, keyword search is out. Then I'm looking at, okay, well, surely someone else has built stuff like this. In fact, at South by Southwest, there's a huge AI and journalism contingent, and they're all about, at the time, this is a couple of years ago, they're all about CNNs, and there's several open source models that try to classify clickbaitiness. They're very specific, and even in their specific domain, based on my kind of just basic manual testing, they're not very good. They don't work.
Can you briefly say what CNN stands for?
Convolutional neural network, so basically a dumb AI. So like not an LLM. Baby, a little small LLM. And then complex rules. So this is basically at the complex rule stage, I'm this guy, the crying dude. I'm like, okay, well, if we have some keyword search and a clickbait CNN and some hard-coded rules, maybe all together we score it up and then boom, now we can classify a post. Well, that wasn't gonna work. So this is where, Jimmy, to your point, that's where I was like, all right, just use ChatGPT, bro. And this is actually before 4.0, so this is GPT-4. And it wasn't quite as nice as this little GIF picture, but it basically proved the concept, which is I can grab posts in a feed. I don't know if this replays or not. There we go. Grabs posts in a feed, and it cuts out at the time I was really angry at too many, cute pets in my feed, and I just wanted there was some hurricane that was hitting Texas. So I was like, that's relevant news. I don't need to see the dog on the skateboard, even though that's how my feed ends up. So at a very high level, kind of manually, I was able to get that working essentially in a weekend. And for me, that was enough. There's probably maybe, I don't know in hindsight if that was enough information, but at the time I was like, okay, this is enough information. This is theoretically possible. I'm going to quit my job and actually go for this. So that was a year and a half ago. And of course, I learned quite a bit of stuff after quitting my job. The first thing I learned is that, well, in order to, especially on platforms like Instagram, but a vast majority of posts are increasingly going to become, or currently, media heavy. So for example, if someone posts like a hashtag and then a meme, like any person in a millisecond can figure out this is a meme, this is what it's talking about, it's relevant, it's irrelevant. Most likely it's brain rot, but maybe some people like memes in their feed. So that's, that's like an image that needs to be processed by an LLM. Super expensive, super slow, not going to work. And unfortunately, one of the things I increasingly found is that one of the top priorities of my users was speed. Because if you think about it, you open your phone, the whole reason you enjoy scrolling is because it's so seamless. You don't have to click anything, it's just down. You don't even go left or right, it's literally just down. So easy, right? So if I'm gonna filter the feed, people want to be able to get to their information faster. They don't want to have to jump through additional hoops, right? That's gonna be a friction point. So that kind of began some of the more difficult decisions and things I had to figure out. So I'm trying to solve this kind of Rubik's Cube, which is how do I select a model or a combination of models that can be smart, fast, and cheap, which is they're not on the same spectrum, right? So all your LLMs are over here, and all your CNNs are over here, your little baby models that can run on device super fast. They're dumb, they can't do anything. And yeah, private is a separate thing I'll mention in a second. Yeah, that was the real challenge. And here's some numbers for you. So for example, when I was manually testing this, I was getting 2 to 5 seconds per image through a decent sized LLM. And I don't think I wrote down the price, but the it was going to be expensive. I was not going to be able to make a business. I forget the exact number, but we're not going to be asking users to spend $1,000 a month on filtering their feed. They already spend $0. It's hard enough to get them to spend $5 for a month. That's a massive ask, right? Even 1 penny. So, you know, a crazy amount is just not in the question. So, side note on privacy, because I know that's important. When I was starting to kind of figure out the pieces to this puzzle, obviously I'm working on a pleb lab surrounded by developers and Bitcoiners, and everyone's like, well, it'd be really cool if I could run this on device so I'm not sending all of my social media data to you, the corporation, right? And so I tried very hard for maybe 1 or 2 months to try to get this whole thing to run inside of your browser. And if not in your browser, at least on your computer. And what I found basically boils down to these bars here. So like the same process would take 2 seconds if I tried to do it in your browser, 0.8 seconds if I was doing it on your computer, and 0.1 seconds if you do it on a GPU. And so it's like it's a massive difference. Now, of course, if your computer is a gaming rig, like you can get those same speeds, but that's just at the beginning, not counting for like a backed up queue or network requests or all these other things. So I really needed the certain raw performance of that kind of initial image analysis to be like as low as possible so that I could ultimately hit the user experience of a seamless scroll. And what does seamless mean? I could pretty much quantify that to right around the 300 millisecond mark. So if I could do the image analysis in 100 milliseconds, well, you add in a bunch of network requests and some delays, and all of a sudden you're at 500. Okay, that's like a stone's throw away from what a user would consider seamless. We're kind of in the genre of a decent user experience. But all the other stuff is out the window. And another thing too is when I talk to people, it was very much like a group of people, like probably a lot of us would care about privacy and local stuff. But for the general users, there's a lot more people that just struggle with social media than there are people who care about privacy. And so like at that point, it's kind of a decision. Do I want to make this broad product, or do I want to try to make something that is private? And frankly, I don't even think if I did make the privacy stuff, the product would be good enough to be used in general. So that was a really tough decision for me. I tried super hard to make it work. But if any of you guys are working on browser models, I really like transformers.js. If you follow them on Hugging Face, they do a lot of cool stuff. I think it's a very active project. I think they're on V3 now, so that was very excited about them. The reason the browser doesn't work, by the way, is because it chops up all the instructions. So you aren't able to basically control the GPU directly, or the CPU for that matter. You can't control the instruction sets from your app. Chrome or the browser is making the final call on how that's getting divvied up. So that adds a ton of overhead for any instructions. Okay, smart enough, fast enough, cheap enough. That's the goal. And privacy is out of the question, unfortunately. So that's basically what I'm trying to solve here. And that boils down to smart enough means we're getting images. Fast enough means I'm running it on a GPU, not on a CPU or not on a laptop. And cheap enough means I'm not using frontier models, at least not frontier models with images attached. So here's multimedia. I got this for you, Car. So I broke down multimedia, and the reason I'm kind of going through it, my presentation this way, because I'm trying to illustrate like the process that I take when I'm approaching these problems, which is like, okay, the problem to solve is multimedia. What does multimedia mean, right? And then break it down. We were talking about this earlier, just kind of like scoping out what's the world model of like what is a multimedia. And so like the two big things I hit on is an explanation of what the image is, which is a descriptive caption, which is actually very hard to find descriptive captions. Most captions are artistic captions. And optical character recognition, which you can use very lightweight models to do optical character recognition. But getting a descriptive caption of a brand new image, this was like super challenging. What you need is a visual language model. Obviously, if I take a nano banana, I can throw in this image and it can explain it in more detail than any smaller scale model is ever going to be able to. but first of all, I don't need all that detail, and second of all, we're back at the multi-seconds and expensive problem. So I can't build a product with that with those constraints. So this is the approach I started taking, and first I was working on OCR. I'm trying to solve this all at the same time, by the way, so this was not a linear process, but I think the story's better if it's linear. Optical character recognition. So lots of digging and also lots of trying to figure out what is the right way to measure OCR, like what matters. And basically, accuracy is obvious and speed is fairly obvious too. But then there's like, okay, well, I could sacrifice this much speed and get this much accuracy. So now you have to make kind of a balancing act. And at the end of the day, you just kind of look at the results and you say, okay, if it's 9 out of 10 correct, like that feels right to me. You do have to make certain calls. But this one model that I found right here, clearly on this graph, is bigger than the rest of them. I mean, basically what this is, it's accuracy per elapsed second. So if I spend a second of time, how much accuracy do I get? So it's kind of like the density of the model. And I can't explain to you why this model has such a high performance. I suspect it's because there's less kind of things tacked on. So you have kind of like the core, what do you call the LLM architecture?
Transformer?
Yeah, the transformer. So it's not, this one's not transformer, but yeah, it's like you have the core transformer model, and then you tack on like, you tack on your safety and compliance thing on top and this thing on top. My suspicion is that every time that people tack on things, like, oh, now it can handle multi-language. Oh, now it can handle this. That adds like a ton of latency in the overall model. That's my suspicion. I don't know if that's the case. But in any case, easy OCR, very simple, but great performance for a short amount of time. About 50 milliseconds to get a OCR reading. So then the visual language model was way harder to solve. And I went through like 50 Hugging Face models. I can't even tell you exactly how many. Like I just went through every Hugging Face model I could possibly find. And they're very difficult because one's in an ONCS format, one's in another format, and then you have to convert them all. And then none of the environments in Python like match. So it was just like a really not fun pain in the butt process. And then I basically went through everything. Like I was on like page 5 of Hugging Face for some of these search queries. I'm like, okay, I'm not finding anything here. But I did find this one paper, which is a distilled version of the Salesforce blip model. And the reason these types of models are so hard to find is because all the money is going to the frontier models. So everyone wants to make the biggest, smartest model. People don't really care about latency. And the people that are making the small, fast models are like open source or academia. So in schools, you'll see papers that are published on these little small models. But ever since ChatGPT came out, everyone's just pushing to that end. The in-between is very difficult. And then already in the in-between, most of the captioning models are artistic because that's like the training data. So it's very difficult to get a descriptive caption. Anyways, I found this one, and I literally only found 2 candidates. One of them had 99% of the code on GitHub, but not the actual model. And the other one was kind of this like weird Chinese thing that was owned by ByteDance, and like I wasn't going to be able to get access to it. So I emailed the guy, but that was like a long shot. So this one was the model I was going to go for. 100 million parameters, so like decent size. So that's like translates to a couple gigabytes of VRAM, and it could do that kind of 90 millisecond. Real world is more like 120 millisecond, but it's fast, right? It's very fast for what you get and cheap. Now, simultaneously to all this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be running these stuff. I'm going to need some GPUs to run it on, so I might as well just use AWS, right? Well, personally, AWS was a pain in the ass. The bureaucracy was crazy, super complicated. Their docs were so massive. Even the Amazon chatbot couldn't explain to me how their docs work and how I could get set up, get the right credentials and everything. Huge waste of time. And then even when I got it running, it was extremely expensive. So I like that I'm set up on AWS and that I can always expand very quickly via AWS. But in terms of like the cost and the bureaucracy, it would have been so much easier. In hindsight, what I should have done is gone to Craigslist and just got the best gaming computer I could find on Craigslist and just run it on Linux that way. Like that, probably with OpenClaw. But what I built was this thing. And if anyone's thinking about building an AI rig, write down this URL of this YouTube or take a picture, because like this is a cool YouTube video in general. So I basically was looking, I was like, okay, here's the kind of stats I think I need. And this rig is only, I think it goes up to 1 terabyte of RAM in theory. So I only have like half of the slots filled on RAM. In theory, I think you could get 8 GPUs on it, but you could get like 6 Zen 4. So it's like just a super beefy kind of rig, but it's a lot of consumer hardware. And I think I spent $4,500 total, and I probably could have gotten it down to like maybe 4,000. It was all used parts from China. So that was great. PayPal actually banned me in the process because I overdrafted.
Were you having to convert by 16 lanes down to match the board, or did the board have 4 of them?
The board is, I think the board was all Zen 4, and which I think is 32 lanes.
Oh.
But yeah, so like over here, it's like, I don't know, 1632, 1632. I think that's right. And then there's like an 8 lane there. Maybe 1 or 2 8 lanes. So like in theory, you could split it probably and do 16 GPUs if you're really crazy. Eventually, the problem is the power supply though. So in this specific build, the real issue I ran into is when I was running 4 3090s on it, the power supply would, the problem is the capacitor in the power supply would get blown when there's like a spike from all the GPUs. And this is a 1600 watt titanium. It's like a good gaming power supply, totally insufficient to handle those spikes simultaneously, just on a 3090. So think about a 5090 is probably way worse. And I actually blew a piece of metal out of something in there. I don't know what it was, but that's really bad. And like, it's terrifying because like I was away too. I wasn't even home. And I have like a family that lives above me. So like, I'm like, man, I could have killed all this whole family. It's really actually like kind of terrifying because because the metal like literally it blew out. I've never seen anything like that. Like a chunk of metal came out from right here and was like laying like horizontally inside there and shorting 2 things inside the power supply. Really bad news. So when I came home, I was like, oh, it's all turned off and the transformer's blown. So I turned it back on, got a new fuse and turned it back on, and I just saw the spark. What?
That sounds like Final Destination.
Yeah. So, bomb. Yeah, this was a pain in the butt. So in hindsight, I didn't like AWS, and also I think this rig, it's cool. I like that I have it now, but probably the smart decision would be just to get Craigslist, maybe a dual GPU Craigslist gaming computer, and then do all the scaling. Yeah, maybe there's some other company now that does a better experience than AWS. Okay, so we're getting to the end now. I don't know if I've gone fast or slow car. I'm just sort of rambling a bit. Cool. So this is basically the system that I've come up with. So fast, multimedia aware, cheap LLM analysis on social posts. So basically what's happening here, and this is like the AI stuff was hard, but actually the scraping stuff is even harder, but I'm not going to go into that. But the scraping happens and you get a post, right? It's like, at this point, it's a JSON. And inside a post, there's basically 2 types of posts that you could end up with on any social media platform. Either a text-only post, in which case I just run that through a Cloudflare worker that goes to GPT 4.1 Nano, super fast. Or the case that I've been trying to solve for, which is you have text, an image, and then the image might also have text on it, in which case in parallel, I do the VLM image captioning and then the OCR. And then each image, if it's not batch, so if it's just linear, it takes 100 milliseconds to get through that process. And then the real pain in my butt right now is ChatGPT, which on a good day, it's 500 milliseconds. But sometimes I see like 1 second response time from 4.1 nano, by the way. So a lot of that is just internet latency or their load on their servers. I've looked into cutting them out of the loop. It's very difficult. In fact, my very final point is, so at the very beginning, I started with, oh, just use an LLM, bro, and get it, and just get it done. After building all this stuff and sort of having a system that works, I'm coming all the way back around and I'm looking back at ChatGPT and saying, how can I cut this out of the loop? And at the end of the day, it's just try to make your tech that aligns with delivering the value to users.
If you're using Workers, you can't use Workers AI, use LLMs with the Cloudflare platform.
Well, so yeah, so I have a worker on Cloudflare.
But
Yeah.
I'm saying specifically using Workers to do the inference without calling out the AI.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's like a cost problem. I haven't looked too deeply. I know that Cloudflare has it, and I think at some point I checked the numbers on the cost. But anytime you're using GPU, the cost is so much higher than like the electricity cost of your house plus some overhead of buying the machine. But I would imagine that these costs are coming down. Like some of the stuff that Christopher was building or other people can maybe bring the cost of compute down.
Great buttons across their tiers, but I don't know if it impacted the GPU side.
Yeah, I should look into it again because I don't want to go back to AWS. That was horrible. Yeah, so that's my whole talk. So I guess like the main message I just want to leave you guys with is all these decisions that I had to make, and kind of a lot of the ones that are sort of a little bit contrarian in that, like, oh, I need to go with a medium-sized model, or I need this two things in parallel, or I'm foregoing an LLM and instead using a VLM. All these decisions are just driven by solving a user's pain, as opposed to what I have done in the past, which is fit a cool technology into try to sell cool technology to users. So yeah, that's a QR to my website. So you can, if you want to test out feed filter, it'll show you who is spamming your social media feed, not on Nostr, only X, Instagram, and Facebook probably won't work, unfortunately, because it's private. But yeah, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer. Did I what?
Bring your PC with you.
My what?
Your PC.
Oh yeah, the rig. Yeah, it's in the car. Yeah, no, it's about this big. Very inefficient use of space.
Question about your build. Is it like, does it run too hot?
It gets a little hot. It gets a little toasty, for sure.
Only under load or generally?
It definitely both, I guess. Like it generally, like you can feel it, the heat. But yeah, I mean, it's not crazy. I mean, it's just, yeah, just normal, I guess. It's like, yeah, I guess it's like two gaming computers next to each other. But I have like no, like my there's no fans. Like I should probably like have a case. It's like fan, like, Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you call it? Positive pressure or whatever. So I didn't, it is like the processor's liquid cooled, but I figured open air would be better. And then I learned about the kind of basics of building PCs that I should have had the positive air pressure. I was just trying to be cheap though. So like, so this is how I got really cheap components. This rack is an old Ethereum mining rack, $20. These GPUs were probably between, I think I paid 800 for them each-ish, but I think you can get them for 500 each from China. And these are old Ethereum mining GPUs. So they're mined out and like they're burnt and charred and they were like in nasty condition, but I don't care. I just want the VRAM, right? So I don't really need them maxed out. In fact, in order to avoid the PSU like blowing up problem, what I did is with NVIDIA CLI or NVIDIA SMI, you can control the clock speed. You can control two things, the voltage and the clock speed. This is actually really important if you try to build something like this. The voltage, so your little process comes along, it goes onto the GPU, it executes that process, and then in hindsight, the voltage regulator looks back and says, how many volts did we just use? And then it says, oh, we better lower it for the next one. The problem though is that spike has already occurred and it's traversing into your PSU and your capacitor in your PSU sucks, so it's just gonna blow out. So what so what I have to do, unfortunately, is I have to set the clock speed. The clock limiter function in the NVIDIA tool allows you to slow down that cycle time, which sucks, right? No one wants to slow down their cycle time, but it prevents like the spikes. The smart way to do is just have a big capacitor there somewhere, but that's like a whole nother problem I didn't want to get into.
I also thought in China they are like repurposing used or like broken GPUs. They just get the chip out and then they put it in another PCB and they got a new card like working.
Yeah, I've heard rumors that you can actually take out the VRAM on these things, and I think you can get them up to 32. So there's 24 gigs of VRAM each, but I think you can literally just solder in more VRAM, and somehow it works. But that's like really sketchy because they're really tiny boards.
To know whether you're blaming your soldering that minuscule part.
Everything on this was used with the exception of the PSU. That was the only new item, and that's the thing that fucking sparked. So I literally got 2 of those. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, I'm all for it. I never thought I would like used computer parts. Like I wouldn't buy a used laptop. Well, actually, I have bought a used laptop, so I don't know. I guess like electronics don't really wear down the way like a car does. Bueller? Cool.
I have one question. How do you define the users of your application? So who was speaking?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I started with sort of a more like personal descriptions, like, oh, they're people like me or people like my friends. And then I did a lot of qualitative research. And so, for example, for me personally, the main issue that I actually struggle with is more so on the kind of killing my goals front, because I just feel like I just get so sucked into like YouTube, for example, and 3 hours will go by and like I didn't get anything done. I should have been vibe coding that whole time. But so like this was my biggest issue, but I suspected that like the addiction aspect would be really bad for people. But the more I talked to people, the more I realized that wasn't quite hitting the mark. And even this, like the sort of fracturing relationships piece, like that gets people to resonate with sort of the mission, but it's not necessarily how users view it. So in the past, I've done a lot of market research through like other startups. I've learned how to do that. So I ran a big survey, and I surveyed, at the end, I got 770 like really high quality responses on the survey. And what was really interesting is their top needs. They don't view themselves, most people don't view themselves as, I have an addiction problem. It's that the platform is screwing me. And also it's more like I try to block or mute someone and then they come back. So for example, like on YouTube, I got a comment from someone that said they blocked Joe Rogan, and then someone who has like Joe Rogan on his podcast comes into their feed, right? So clearly they're watching Joe Rogan, but they don't want to see it. And then when they squash that just turned into like manosphere content. They didn't want to see any of this. So like all this stuff just ended up in their feed. And that's like kind of the whack-a-mole game that I think a lot of people are playing. So I would say that's how people view it. It's more about getting to the information you care about faster and cutting through the noise, more so than like overcoming an addiction or healing political trauma with your sister or anything like that. Like that's all. Those just weren't the top needs when I talked to people. When I really like did like big objective research. So I have like a very detailed description of who these people are. It's never good enough. Like you always want more granularity. But what's really interesting is I can't say that it's a certain political disposition. I can't say it's a certain age. I can't say it's a certain technical aptitude. So it's like the way I can describe them is more just about they use social media frequently. They're not influencers. They generally try to use lots of these. Anyone who is not interested on a social media post is basically somewhere in this domain. But then, of course, there's like a scale of how extreme it gets. And yeah, a lot of frustrated people out there. So I have basically a long list of basically bullet point descriptions about what they care about. And those bullet point descriptions this is a whole nother thing, but the the way I describe a user need, like again, like just like the way I describe multimedia, it's like, well, what is a need, right? You can't just say, oh, if one person says it one way and the other person says it a different way, then it's equally valid, right? So I would say, okay, user need, what does a user need break down into? And I would say at the fundamental level, it's a goal that they're trying to accomplish. People say, oh, I'm resolving a problem. I would say problems exist in relation to a goal that you're trying to solve, right? So yeah, so basically define the goal, define it in a way that removes biasing language. So a lot of people will say that you uncover needs by getting stories and empathy and looking at facial expressions and all this stuff. I just think like if you talk to a scientist is going to say, well, that doesn't make sense. So we can't measure that, right? So that's what a lot of UX research does today. And then they try to interpret that narrative and they turn that into like a tech to-do list. So you went from something that's like totally mushy, you got to something that's totally rigid. I'm a big fan of kind of a bridge where it's like you take the mushy stuff and you get it into like a very definite language, and then you rank it in a survey on a scale of importance versus satisfaction. High importance, very important for people. Low satisfaction, they're unsatisfied. That gap means it's an unmet need, and an unmet need should be ranked higher on your to-do list than a met need. And so that's when you can start making those trade-offs of like latency versus accuracy. You know, those all have to come from the prioritization of the user.
You touched on an issue when you were answering this question with respect to the example about Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
What you mentioned actually goes across several platforms. You gave an example for YouTube. Have you come to that juncture for trying to solve for if I want to block plastic cups and somebody else tweets or posts about plastic cups, am I still going to see it? Because if I understand that the block works for me, but it's on that first level, any secondary level, I'm still going to see it.
Yeah.
And that is a complaint a lot of people have, that a lot of people complain about because they don't understand that difference. Oh, they're like, hey, I blocked. Yeah, you blocked it at first level, but second level is still going to come through because it's tied to someone's direct profile.
Yeah.
But whoever could solve that, hey, I don't want to ever hear about this. Anybody that can solve for that, that's a bonus as a selling.
Yeah, that's my goal. That's my goal. Currently, the way the Chrome extension works, so I'm mostly talking about the website, which is very basic. From a technical perspective, I'm not as excited about the website versus the app, but I think the website just like converts way better and it's like easier for people to understand, see who's spamming my feed. Like that's a very clear value prop. Oh, I punch in my handle, I see who's spamming my feed. Done, right? But the cool thing is what you're talking about, which is if you're running an app and you're viewing your feed through that app, either via extension in your browser or via an app on your phone, then on a single post, what it currently does today is you click block posts like this, and then you give a reason. And what that does is it writes a system prompt, which you can edit in settings. And the system prompt says, yeah, like, this is like what we think is the category that this falls into. And then it checks every post against that reason. So basically, you know, right at this step, when it's feeding into ChatGPT, it's got your system prompt in there that you have control over. The problem though is that it's on a post by post basis, people are very skeptical of the ranking of the system, no matter how much time they put into writing up that prompt. First of all, they don't want to put any time into settings in general, but if they did, then they're very skeptical that the AI is accurately categorizing it as spam or not, which is a fair point. I'm thinking about better ways to go about that.
Well, and you take 5 people, you're going to say, one person's going to say 100% everything goes, and the next person is going to say, well, yeah, everything except this, I would still want to hear about it. That nuance is going to be difficult to navigate in some cases.
Yeah, so I basically start with a kind of a generic set, and then, yeah, people add on their own rules, and it's individualized, so each person gets a totally individual ranking.
I think it would be actually characterized as not a perfect solution, but a solution that improves what you have now, what a person has now.
Yeah, it's a filter. The goal is to beat the native tool. So whatever you can get natively on the platform using their tools, if you're still struggling, but you don't want to delete the app and throw your phone off a cliff, if you're not quite at that level, then a middle ground. We should be able to like use social media and not get bogged down for all these reasons. So that's the goal ultimately. Still a work in progress.
So it occurs to me that you've kind of overbuilt your compute rig.
Yeah.
For your likely demand right now on your feed filter. I'm wondering if you are planning on doing like a load balancing, like a compute load balancing by like completing data vending machine jobs when you're not actually running your feed filter.
Definitely.
You should sell your spare compute. Wonder if there's a product for that.
If only it was Apple Silicon.
But look, what's the other things? But can we help you kill that fucking OpenAI icon? Like replace that shit with the network, and then let other people who want to customize filters, however, you know.
Yeah, but it's got to be fast. That's the problem. Is like in the speed is 4.1 nano is super optimized for its like intelligence for speed. I haven't looked into this in the last 8 months though, so it could be better stuff out there now. But yeah, like yes, I do want to kill that. And then of course the network's latency is another thing too. So like you know, if it adds 100 milliseconds of network latency, but the model is 100 milliseconds faster, then there's no difference on a speed.
But note also that we're not limited to consumer hardware. For example, I have a Gemini API key. Google gave me $100,000 in credits. Let's use the fuck out of this Flash. Maybe a teeny bit of Bitcoin. You know, like other people will have things like that. Like,
Yeah. But yeah, totally. Like lots of unused hardware. One of the annoying things about GPU is like when the model's loaded up. I've learned so much, but I still like don't fully understand like GPU like slots of memory. But I can't like easily run if the server is like live and serving people. I have unused VRAM, but in order to access that unused VRAM, I get bottlenecked at the connection point between. I get bottlenecked right there, right? The connection between the board and the GPU. So that's really challenging if I want to try to run like 2 different models or 2 of the same model even on the same GPU. That makes sharing like theoretical capacity is really difficult due to that bottleneck. So that's like one of the challenges that I have. It's better to just have one big model that maxes out the space on each GPU. So I literally have OCR running on one GPU and the VLM running on a different GPU, even though both of them are like 70% not being used on the VRAM front.
You mentioned Apple Silicon. If you're able to get your app approved, are you able to move some of the compute onto the consumer device?
Yes, and it's slower. So that's the trade-off. So it's like I could do that, but that's the difference. This is Apple Silicon. So this, I think I benchmarked this on an M4, the 800 milliseconds. So it's like almost 10x slower on Apple Silicon versus on, because like you're talking about like CUDA, like I mean it's like way different magnitude. But that depends on the model, right? So like my model is like it's not thinking, it's not doing a lot of CPU rounds. It's just it should be all on the GPU. So it's really how well does it compile into GPU code. But I think it's going to be a little time before some of my stuff can go on the consumer. That's the end goal though, for sure. Obviously, way better. I thought I saw another hand over here somewhere. No? Okay. Cool. Well, thanks guys.